Morning, guys. Very early in the morning. What is it? 5:36 a.m. This is the only way that I can get on here and talk to you about Elvis um, without the kids jumping on me and the dogs barking. So I've got extra early to make a couple of videos. I'm going to do one here on defending Elvis Presley. Then I'm going to jump over and do one on Elvis Presley fan on keto. So I recommend you subscribe to both. So, Barbara Hearn popped up on my feed, and it just got me thinking about her. She knew him when he was in his prime. She was friends with Dixie, one of Elvis's sweethearts. So I thought, let's just talk about her. I found a George Klein interview. I thought we're going to talk about her and play the interview and just learn something together. Team Elvis will learn together about Barbara Hearn. So I don't actually know that much about her. So on here on my phone, it says, Elvis 21 and Barbara 19 started dating in 1956. Elvis knew Barbara since he was a teenager, as he used to give her rides home from work, as she worked with his high school sweetheart, Dixie Locke. We've done a few videos about Dixie. She seems lovely. And she knows Elvis before he became famous. And I think she caught the very early stages of Elvis becoming famous. The pair dated about a year, but saw each other occasionally until the early 1960s. Let's see if we get some more information here. Now we're learning together, guys. It says here is an interview where Barbara discusses Elvis and their relationship. Okay, well that's interesting. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to just play a little bit here, and then we're going to start reading some of that. We're going to go back and forth, and we can sort of compare the two. Okay. So obviously a much older Barbara Hearn there, talking about her life, how it ended up. She looks just like a normal, mild-mannered, lovely lady. Who'd have thought she dated Elvis Presley? Could you imagine that? The rock and roll star from the 50s, the rebellious teenager. Right, so it says here is an interview with Barbara and discusses Elvis and their relationship. What did you like most of him? Barbara Hearn Smith. I liked his personality, his sense of fun, the excitement of being with somebody unpredictable. I think this was true. The early Elvis was very unpredictable. You never knew what kind of activity he would embark on. It's funny because I've heard this said by the Memphis Mafia, by other girlfriends. He was very, very adventurous, wasn't he? Full of life, excited to go out and do things. After the movies, it was fun to hear his stories of Hollywood and the actors that he met. Wow, I mean, you think about it, guys. Elvis from Memphis grew up in Tupelo, and he's mixing with the most famous celebrities in the world. Could you imagine the stories Elvis had to tell, meeting all these different people in Hollywood? He was a great storyteller. He was sweet and tender and thoughtful, and at times he was short-tempered and out of sorts. In many ways, he was just like anyone else. In most ways, however, he was extraordinary in all the best ways. Oh, I love that. He was extraordinary in all the best ways. This player, Nick Adams guy, was friends with James Dean, and he was in the film Rebel Without a Cause. James Dean. Wasn't Barbara beautiful when she was young? She's stunning. So it says, what kind of a boyfriend was Elvis? Barbara Hearn Smith. Elvis was thoughtful, polite. The youth of today, unless they are serious history students, cannot imagine how life was for young people in the 1950s in America. He telephoned me every day. Girls at the time, for the most part, did not telephone their boyfriends unless it was very serious matters. Families would frown upon that, and the boys' families would have. Sorry, I can't read that bit. A young girl forward, not very late. Right, okay, I get it. So if a young girl was very forward, it was not ladylike. A reputation once won was not to be thrown away lightly. So I get it, you know. In those days, the girls had to be proper, had to be decent, and had to not have a bad reputation. So we understand. The men were looking for girls that were more innocent, that had not been around. I get it, guys. Get it. 1950s, 1960s. Males and females were comfortable around him. When he and I were together, he was everything one could wish for in a suitor. There's a great picture here. I'm not sure how well you're going to see that. It doesn't focus very good, does it, on this camera? Let's keep listening. She knew. So here we've got another write-up saying, Elvis was singing in the men's room, but I'd gotten used to it. Time, though, there was something new, and it led me, after all these years, to the legendary Barbara Hearn. A little explanation, all right. A lot of explanation is in order. So who's this written by? Oh, it's written by someone called Bob Green. Let's see if we can find a bit about Barbara. Some brilliant pictures of her. Let me just minimize this, see if I can show you some of the pictures. It's funny because I'm sorry because I'm learning as I go. I'm not sure how well I've just shown you this, but this one's got an autograph on it. So she would have signed that. Right, so people sometimes say that Elvis and I went steady for a year, she told me. I always correct them. I went steady with Elvis for a year. Elvis, well, he didn't go steady with anyone. Still the morning, guys. My throat's a bit croaky. I need my tea. But she was his girlfriend during his remarkable ascent in 1956. Obviously, Elvis did that in 1956. There was a famous photograph taken by Alfred Wertheimer inside the home of Audubon Drive in Memphis that Presley shared with his parents. This was pre-Graceland. In the photo, Barbara is a prim in white dress with dark polka dots. Elvis is slouched and shirtless. People don't understand what's in the picture, she told me. He had just been outside standing in his new swimming pool. It was just being filled up with a garden hose. I was dressed to go out with him for the evening, all gussied up. And what we're doing is, he had taken the train back from New York, where he had recorded some of the new songs with RCA Victor. He had brought back the recordings. They had not been released yet. We were listening to one of them, and he wanted to know if I thought it was good. And I said I thought it was. And it was Don't Be Cruel. Wow, now that's interesting. Let's see if we can show you this picture. I'm not sure. I wonder if it will let me blow it up. Wow. I didn't realise this was Barbara Hearn. Okay. Let's see if the camera will. That's just amazing. So basically, I have seen this picture before, I think. I didn't realise it was Barbara Hearn. So he had just come back from a long train ride recording with RCA Victor, and he had the recordings with him, and they wanted to listen, and it was Don't Be Cruel. We know that Don't Be Cruel was one of Elvis's biggest ever hits, wasn't it, guys? So that's so interesting. I'm going to read some more of that. Let's just play some more of this. I'm going to top my cup of tea up. Do you know what? Every time I read about Gladys, from anyone that met her, they all say how lovely she was, how kind and caring. Obviously, she doted on Elvis, but she was just a lovely, good-hearted person. Obviously, a Christian lady that was very, very kind to all of Elvis's friends. So let me just read a bit more of this. So we're still talking about this picture. It says here, after having taken a shower and still bare-chested, Elvis had his high school sweetheart Barbara Hearn listen on the phonograph to the acetate disc with cuts of his songs from New York recording sessions at 1034 Audubon Drive, Memphis, Tennessee, on July the 4th, 1956. Soon enough, we went to Hollywood. By the end of the year, we would be bringing Natalie Wood to Memphis to meet his parents. Wow. I'll be honest with you guys, I love Natalie Wood. West Side Story and Rebel Without a Cause. Just love those films so much. We know that Elvis dated her a bit. I've read that Gladys wasn't keen on her. I think even Natalie was a bit uncomfortable with the closeness Elvis had with his mum. So it just wasn't meant to be, was it, guys? Don't they portray it in the Kurt Russell film? I think it's in the Kurt Russell film. They do a little clip of it. So it says here, Natalie Wood to Memphis to meet her parents, and then Barbara Hearn says that she didn't mind if the roles had been reversed and I had been the one to go to Hollywood. I'd met Gregory Peck. I would have brought Gregory Peck back to Memphis with me. She eventually went to work in Washington for one of Tennessee U.S. Senators, Estes Cathora. Don't know who that is. It was there that he met her future husband. She saw Elvis only infrequently over the years and never lost her affection towards him. That year in 1956, I saw him go from being barely famous to a superstar, she said. From a boy to a man, and now, more than half a century later, there they are in the restroom, accompanied by the sound of his voice. She said she had no idea until I told her. What a hoot, she said, and laughed again. He's a friend who never stops giving. I see what you mean. There's another picture. She's beautiful. I completely see why Elvis liked her. But Elvis was set for great things, big things. Let's keep listening. We're all going to say this, aren't we? Elvis, he definitely would have lived, in my opinion, and many of you guys, Team Elvis fans around the world, he would have been a different person if Mum had lived longer. She died so young when Elvis was so young. It's so sad that Elvis had to live his life so long without his beautiful mother who he adored, Gladys. So it's so sad. So it says here, I found another clip. I wonder if we can find something on here about Barbara. There was a framed, autographed photo on the wall of a young Elvis smiling next to a dark-haired woman. The autograph was hers. the signature was Barbara Hearn Smith. For Presley, the name Barbara Hearn is as historic as Martha Washington or Betsy Ross or Marty Todd Lincoln. She was Elvis's hometown girlfriend in Memphis at the beginning of 1956, just before his career hit the stratosphere. That was the year everything changed. By the time it was over, Presley's old life was in the rearview mirror, and part of the old life, presumably, was Barbara Hearn. Can you imagine that, knowing Elvis, just before he's about to become the most famous man on the planet? But now, in the dwindling weeks of 2011, in the brick-topped men's room, here was Elvis's singing, here was Barbara Hearn autograph, and a closer inspection of the handwriting revealed that she was saying that she had dined at another Bricktop in Nashville, Tennessee. So she still strides the American continent. I had to find her. Interesting. I think this man is trying to find her. Let's just play it. So let's just read this bit. The girl who was one of Elvis's big favourites in 1956-57, Barbara Hearn, an 18-year-old Memphis girl who was often seen by Elvis' side, especially in 1956, and whose framed photo was kept in the Presley family living room, and obviously much liked Elvis. Elvis's mother, Gladys, she was with the family at the 4th of July concert in Memphis and backstage with Elvis and his parents at the Tupelo concerts in September 1956. It was obvious he cared a lot about her. But Elvis, being Elvis, spent his vacation in July with June Junico in Biloxi. Invited Natalie Wood to spend the weekend with him in Memphis and invited Las Vegas dancer Dottie Harmony to celebrate Christmas with him that year. Still, he continued seeing Barbara, who of course knew she shared him with others. Their relationship ended in 1957. Elvis met Anita Wood. Barbara went on to study at the university. In 1961, she married Jim Smith. So she married Jim Smith eventually, which turned out to be a very long, happy marriage. I think 51 years. And aren't they running this sort of bed and breakfast together? There's some pictures here. Let's just see if we can. I'm just going to minimize this so I can try and show you the pictures. So great pictures, my guys. She's stunning. Obviously, this is zoomed in when they were playing Don't Be Cruel after Elvis's train journey. Just so interesting. I just find it fascinating. So he says 18 in the write-up, but there's a possibility that she was 19, guys. And this is obviously her marrying her husband. Is it Joe Smith, was it? It's funny, isn't it? I just find that all fascinating. Brilliant. Let's keep going. Put that better. As a human being, he would have been a much happier man. So let me just read this. Several years after the death of Elvis Presley's mother, Gladys, his ex-girlfriend Barbara Hearn was invited to spend the evening with him at his Memphis mansion. They had become an item just as his fame had started to skyrocket in 1956, and she was 19. He was 21. The relationship lasted about a year. When Hearn arrived at Graceland that night, her ex-boyfriend was already besieged by groupies and hangers-on who laughed at everything he said. It wasn't long before the mild-mannered but straight-talking Southern girl had had her fill of the sycophantic fawning. I slipped out to call my mother and pick up, and he followed me and asked why I was leaving. I said, "Actually, honey, I'm just not having a good time." He looked so sad, he said. "Neither am I." He knew my mother very well, and when she arrived, he had to get out of the car and he just hugged and hugged her. When he started driving home, she looked at me and said, "I think Elvis was saying goodbye." We didn't half cry on the way home. I never saw him again after that. So this is how they split up. Now, Barbara Hearn, 85 years old. Hearn spoke exclusively to you prior to the release of the director Baz Luhrmann's eagerly anticipated film, which premiered at Cannes Festival and is widely tipped to be an Oscar nomination for Austin Butler, although not named a girlfriend very like Hearn is depicted by Baz Luhrmann in the early part of the movie. Interesting, guys. Pause this bit a minute. So it says here, she and Presley had started dating at the time when his dreams of stardom were becoming true. Hearn remembers him as a big-hearted, polite boy with a cheeky grin who loved his mum. He depended on her for everything. His entire emotional well-being, she says. He could go to her with any problem. She was always there for him. But everyone in Presley's orbit was about to be swept up by the tidal wave of his fame. As Hearn recalls it, it seemed like overnight that he had to send someone to pick me up for dates. We'd have to call the movie theatres ahead of time so we could go round the back entrance. It started with a handful of people outside his house who wanted to see and talk to him. Suddenly it went from 5 to 10 to 50 to 100 girls outside. And that's why they bought Graceland. The fans were overrunning the house. She noticed the dramatic effect that this change had on Gladys, who went from being a happy woman who laughed generously to someone seriously subdued. She was worried about the fans. Boyfriends would come after him out of jealousy. She worried about him flying. She worried about him being in a car accident and all things that normal mothers worry about for their children. But in this case, it was more extreme. And here's a picture of Elvis's lovely mother. It does seem that as Elvis became more famous, she found it difficult to deal with, to cope with. I think she was very worried about his safety, about people taking advantage of her boy that she adored. I understand it because she lost a twin, Elvis's twin Jesse. She was very, very protective. I get it that she couldn't believe this was happening. Elvis, overnight stardom. Hundreds of people just hanging around trying to get to Elvis. It does seem that there was a point where it just all became too much for her. It's so sad. It's so sad. With watching him, listening to her story, it's just brilliant. So it says here, Presley himself acknowledged the impact that his fame was having on his mother on the 13th of May 1955, on a night now referred to as the first Presley riot. The 20-year-old had just finished a show in Jacksonville, Florida, when he was ambushed by hundreds of screaming fans who pushed into the dressing room and cornered him. The police eventually rescued him from on top of the shower, his shirt and coat torn apart. Someone had even stripped him of his socks and belt. Wow, that's just crazy. That's just madness. The police eventually rescued him. Nurse Presley knew it had upset Gladys, but didn't see how he could protect her. She was afraid that they were hurting him. Poor Gladys. He told an interviewer in 1956, as the reported in Elaine Dundee's book Elvis and Gladys, "Shucks, they were only tearing at my clothes. I didn't mind a bit," I told her. "Mama, if you're going to feel that way, you better not come along to my shows, because that stuff is going to keep on happening." It says here, Baz Luhrmann depicts the fear Gladys experienced in the scene where she berates female fans for manhandling Elvis after a concert. Hearn believes that her difficulty in adjusting to her son's fame was exasperated when he moved to Graceland, and she felt the clash between that gilded cage existence and the outdoor world that she had grown up in. I understand that. You know, Elvis's life completely turned upside down. He'd lost being normal. Elvis loved being normal. I think Elvis loved his life in Tupelo growing up. I think he had a brilliant time, made some great friends. Yes, he struggled. Yes, it was very humble beginnings. But I've read so many stories about Elvis with his friends sneaking into the cinema. He always liked to jump over the division and be with the black kids. Elvis enjoyed his childhood. They struggled. Of course they struggled. We know that Vernon and Gladys struggled. But they also were a lovely little family that just loved each other, that were there for each other. So I understand that once fame came along, that life was taken away. Elvis loved it when he moved to Memphis. We've seen that picture of Elvis on his bike. That picture that was taken almost by accident because a woman wanted to have the last picture on her camera developed so she could take it into the store to get it developed. And Elvis was outside on his little bike. She said, "Can I take a picture?" And it was Elvis on his bike. And then years later, she found this picture in a box in her attic. Now that picture is world famous. So yes, Elvis gave up. He had no choice. Destiny said, you were destined for different things. You will be the most famous man in the world. God-given talents. The way Elvis looked, his personality, his charm, his golden heart. Things were never going to be the same again for Elvis. And it says that here. I think one of the people that was most affected, it seems, was Gladys. Gladys was losing her son. I think this is how she felt. Firstly, to fame, to stardom, to the fans. Then she felt to the army when he was drafted to do his service for his country. Elvis was a proud man. He wanted to serve for his country. He didn't have to serve for his country. He could have done entertainment for the troops, etc. No, Elvis chose to do things the right way. He wanted to be treated just like everyone else. No better. And I think Elvis spent his whole life wanting to treat people as equals, no matter who they were, no matter how rich or poor they were, what colour skin they had. Elvis spent his whole life treating everyone as an equal. I love that in Elvis. I love that. Let's just play the ending of this, and I hope you've enjoyed this, guys. I found it fascinating. That interview. Brilliant, guys. Really enjoyed this. I hope you've enjoyed this. So I'm just trying to sort of scour around, find different interviews like that. People that knew Elvis, knew the true Elvis, the real Elvis, that can tell us about the real Elvis and open a window for us to look into, like a fly on the wall. This has been great. So I'm going to post this on, probably on Defending Elvis Presley, and then again on Elvis Presley Fan on Keto. Hope you enjoy it. We're going to be back for more. Take care, guys. Good morning to you. I've enjoyed drinking my cup of tea. If you're just waking up around the world, many of you are in America. I hope you had a good night's sleep. Please leave it in your comments what country you're in. Good morning. Bye then, guys.